Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight's story is titled, The Subsumed Path. Let the shadows speak. Part 1. The Man Who Came from the Storm Drain. It started like most tragic things do, with a lie. On the night Calvin Mercer walked into our dive bar, dripping rainwater and sewer stink, no one thought he'd end the night screaming bloody murder in the back alley. But I remember the look in his eyes when he first stepped in, hollow, like something had taken up residence behind them, like he'd seen something we weren't meant to see. My name's Rory, by the way. I run Finnegan's Rest, a rundown bar in the west end of Kinsfield. Not the kind of place you go for good whiskey or conversation. It's where dreams go to drown, cheap and in silence. That night, though, silence was off the menu. Calvin Mercer used to be a city maintenance guy, 30-something, gone in a way that suggested cigarettes and guilt more than hunger. He came in just after midnight, soaked to the bone, and carrying a rusted utility flashlight and a duffel bag he wouldn't let out of his grip. "What's the strongest thing you got?" he asked me. I poured him a double of bottom-shelf bourbon. He downed it like water, then stared into the glass like it could offer answers. "You ever seen something so wrong it broke your brain?" he said. I didn't respond. I've bartended long enough to know when someone isn't looking for a reply. He didn't say much more for about an hour, just drank and watched the floor. Occasionally, he'd flinch, like he was hearing something the rest of us couldn't. The few regulars left around that time. I was thinking about closing up when he spoke again. "They're in the tunnels." That made me pause. "Rats?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, not rats. Something older, hungrier, something that doesn't forget." Now, I've heard a lot of crazy in this bar. Guys talking about ghost trains, women saying their shadows talk back. But something about Calvin's voice made my stomach go tight. He wasn't rambling. He was remembering. He took another long drink and finally opened the duffel bag. Inside was a stack of engineering maps, a half-melted clown mask, and what looked like a chunk of concrete. No, not just concrete. It had teeth marks in it, human-sized. "3 of us went down there," he said. 3 of us chasing something stupid, something impossible. 4 nights earlier, the idea had come from Hector. He was the planner, the brain, worked logistics for the city, but had a side hustle running fake inspection crews to rob businesses. Calvin was the inside guy, access to blueprints, tunnels, maintenance routes. Then there was Arlo, the muscle, big guy with more brawn than caution. The 3 of them had worked together before, but this time the plan was different. "There's a bypass drain under East Bank Reserve," Hector told them. Used to lead to a vault room back in the 40s before the bank was remodeled. City sealed it off, but the wall's just brick and prayer now. "We get through it, we get in." They met the next night at a rusted manhole cover behind a boarded-up laundromat. Rain was falling hard, hammering the alley like nature was trying to warn them. Calvin hesitated. "I don't know about this, man. Something feels off." "You've been saying that since we got the maps," Hector said, slapping him on the back. "Don't worry. Arlo's got us covered." That wasn't reassuring. Arlo had the temperament of a junkyard dog. He showed up wearing a bomber jacket and carrying bolt cutters in one hand, a tire iron in the other. They pried open the manhole and descended into the underbelly of the city. The tunnels. The first 30 minutes were uneventful. Just the usual sewage stink, low ceilings, flickering headlamps. Calvin took the lead, using his flashlight to scan for the turnoff Hector had mapped out. Eventually, they reached a split in the path. One side continued along a wider drain. The other dipped into a narrower tunnel barely wide enough to crawl through. "This is it," Hector said. "Past this point, we crawl. About 70 yards in the brick wall. Then jackpot." "I don't like crawling," Arlo muttered. "Can't see shit. Feels like a goddamn grave. You want the money or not?" They all stared into the pitch black hole. Something about it seemed wrong. Not just dark, but empty, like light itself refused to enter. Calvin knelt first. The concrete lip of the tunnel was slick with grime. Cold air breathed out of it in long, steady exhalations, almost like lungs. He didn't say that out loud. He slid in, the concrete slick against his elbows. The air shifted. The deeper he crawled, the quieter things became. No sound from behind. No echo. Just that faint, rhythmic hum, like an old refrigerator running under his skin. He kept crawling. 20 feet in, he paused. The walls felt closer than they should, pressed against his shoulders. The air smelled sweet now. Not sewer sweet, rot sweet. Another 20 feet, and the concrete changed. Softer, warmer. When he pressed his palm to the ground, it gave slightly like old meat. He whispered into the darkness behind him. "Hector? Arlo?" No response. He clicked off his flashlight for a second, then back on, just to make sure it was still working. In the brief darkness, he heard something wet shift ahead of him. Then stillness. He turned to crawl back, but something blocked the way. A face. Part 2. Echoes beneath flesh. Calvin didn't scream. He wanted to. The instinct was there, raw and primal, but his throat refused. His body was paralyzed by the face mere inches from his own. It looked like Arlo and didn't. Same square jaw, same heavy brow, but its eyes were wrong. Milky white, rolled too far up like they were looking inside rather than out. Its lips hung loose, trembling with a slow tremor, drooling something black and bubbling. It whispered in a voice he didn't recognize. "Keep crawling. You're already inside." Then the light from his flashlight blinked once, and the face was gone. Calvin scrambled backward, slipping on something gelatinous that smeared his sleeves. He kicked, clawed, wriggled back toward the tunnel's entrance, only to slam his back against the solid wall. There was no hole, no way back, just rough, pulsing stone. He screamed then. Above ground, rain had stopped. The streets were empty except for a flickering traffic light that seemed to swing too slow for the wind. Back in the tunnels, Hector checked his watch again. "It's been 15 minutes, he said. Arlo cracked his knuckles. He should have hit the wall and come back by now. Or busted through it. Maybe there's another tunnel past it. Let's go." Arlo grunted and shoved his way into the crawl space. Hector hesitated. He looked into the dark and felt something staring back. Not eyes, exactly, more like attention. Focused, ancient, waiting, but he didn't want to be the one left behind. So he crawled in after them. The crawl space was narrower than he expected. The moment Hector passed the lip of the tunnel, it felt like a membrane snapped closed behind him. The sound of running water vanished. The air thickened. Every scrape of his knee against the floor echoed, loud in his ears, too loud. It sounded like it was happening inside his skull. He moved slowly, carefully. 20 feet in, he called out, "Arlo, you good?" From ahead came Arlo's voice, strangely faint. "Something's moving up here. Might be Calvin. Feels tight, though. How far are you?" "Hard to tell. Might be." Thud. A solid, meat-heavy impact. Then silence. "Arlo." "Nothing." Hector clicked his headlamp on full. The beam cut into blackness like a sword, revealing nothing ahead but wet concrete and something red smeared across the left-hand wall. It looked fresh. He crawled faster now, adrenaline overriding logic. The air pressed closer. The hum around him shifted in tone, from a low mechanical purr to something more organic, like slow breathing. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. When the tunnel split unexpectedly to the left and right, Hector froze. There wasn't supposed to be a fork, he muttered, checking the map. But the paper was gone. Not drop gone. His backpack was still zipped, but the maps and tools were missing, replaced by something squirming. He reached in and pulled out a damn clown mask. It wasn't his. His fingers trembled as he held it up to the light. The painted lips were curled in a frozen scream. The white face was smeared with what looked like blood and something darker, something that shimmered like oil on water. A faint sound echoed behind him, slapping wet footsteps, too fast, too erratic. Hector panicked and shoved the mask back in the pack. He didn't want to know. He chose the right-hand tunnel and kept crawling. The wall started to change around the 40-foot mark. They weren't concrete anymore. Not exactly. More like tissue, damp and warm. The ridges became vein-like. Occasionally, Hector's elbow would sink into a patch that pulsed back. He told himself it was heat expansion. Mold. Anything but what it felt like. Then the tunnel bent sharply left, and the floor sloped downward. He lost his footing and slid several feet into a chamber shaped like a throat. It wasn't just humid now. It was wet, but in a way that clung to skin, seeped into socks, whispered through pores. He lit a flare. The chamber lit up in rippling red, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Walls made of something living. They contracted, almost breathing with his own rhythm. Then he saw Arlo. The big man was lying on the floor, curled like a child. His back to Hector. "Arlo," he shouted. No answer. He rushed forward and grabbed his shoulder, only to recoil. Arlo's body was soft. Too soft, like his bones had liquefied inside his skin. He was still breathing. Barely. Hector dropped to one knee and pulled him gently, then froze. A dozen tiny holes ran along Arlo's neck and spine. Circular, pulsing, leaking fluid. He saw one twitch. Something inside the hole moved. Something with an eye. Hector dropped him and staggered back, choking on the sour, sweet stench that filled the air. His flare fizzled in the moisture, casting the chamber into darkness again. From behind him came a voice. Already inside. "Keep crawling." Hector ran, on all fours, scraping his hands bloody against the walls, sobbing openly as the tunnel twisted and split again and again. The breathing walls groaned now. The hum turned into a shrill, high-pitched whine like metal twisting under heat. He hit another junction, turned left, then right, then realized he'd been crawling in circles. That's when the tunnel began to shrink. The roof pressed against his back. His knees couldn't bend. He had to slither now, face pressed to the floor, breath catching in bursts. In the dark ahead, he saw something moving. Not Calvin, not Arlo. Something wearing Calvin's skin. It whispered, "You never left." Part 3. The Mouth Beneath the City. Hector didn't know how long he had been crawling. The tunnel had no angles anymore. It curved in on itself like an intestine, folding and flexing, pushing him toward nowhere. The walls beat softly like a pulse. Occasionally, he swore he could feel them tasting him. He had long since stopped shouting. His voice had cracked hours ago, or maybe days. Tom didn't work here. His watch had melted. Not physically, but the numbers twisted, changing from digits to symbols, then to static. He told himself this was just hypoxia, that he was trapped in an underground gas pocket. That hallucination was expected. But even that logic began to slip, especially when he found the door. It was just there, embedded in the wall. An oak door with a brass knob, pristine and upright, standing like it had no business in a biological tunnel. It looked like it had come from a 1950s office. Faded frosted glass. Black letters, flaked with age, that spelled, "C. Mercer, Field Surveyor." He blinked. That name, Calvin? He reached out and touched the knob. It was warm, unnaturally warm. The door opened with a sound like something exhaling through mucus. Beyond it was a hallway. No tunnel. No biological horror. Just a clean, linoleum-floored corridor lined with flickering fluorescent lights and blank bulletin boards. Hector stepped through. Footsteps echoed like they didn't belong to him. His head felt light, like gravity here was tilted. At the end of the hallway was another door, slightly ajar. Light leaked from inside, yellow and hazy like an old lamp. He pushed it open. Calvin Mercer sat at a desk, filling out paperwork. He looked normal. Too normal. Skin a little pale, but otherwise calm. Like he was processing receipts. "Hey," Hector managed, voice rough. "What the hell is this?" Calvin looked up, smiled. "You finally caught up. I was wondering who'd make it next." Hector shook his head. "Where are we? What happened to the tunnel? To Arlo?" "You're not in the tunnel anymore," Calvin said. "You're in it." What is it?" Calvin's smile faltered. "That's the thing. I don't think it has a name. Not really. Closest I can guess. It's a place that's been fed so long it grew teeth. Or maybe it always had them. It just learned how to chew. Hector took a step back. This is a dream. It's digestion, Calvin replied flatly. You'll adjust. I'm leaving. You can't. Not all the way. Hector ran. Out of the door, down the hallway. But the hallway was different now. Each time he passed a light, it went out behind him. And the walls, they rippled. He reached the door he'd come through. Gone. Just a fleshy seam. He clawed at it, punched, kicked, nothing. Then the corridor collapsed behind him. Not all at once, but section by section, swallowed into a dark throat. Hector screamed and dove forward into a vent. The vent was smaller than the tunnel, tighter, and filled with heat. Not mechanical heat, but body heat. Sweat pooled in his collar, his knees raw and torn. The whispering started again. Crawl, crawl, crawl. Sometimes in his voice, sometimes in Calvin's, sometimes in a deep, grinding tone like bone on metal. He crawled until his elbows bled, until his pants were shreds, until the vent ended and opened into a chamber of teeth. It was massive, like the belly of some ancient thing. Walls lined with ridges like molars, slick and red. The floor writhed with hair-thin tendrils that receded when touched, like worms under light. In the center stood a shape. It wore a maintenance uniform. It had Arlo's size, but its arms were too long, its head too low. The skin sagged off its face like wet rubber. It opened its mouth, and dozens of voices poured out at once, screaming, laughing, pleading, and Calvin's voice, calm and quiet. I told you, you never left. Hector snapped. He grabbed a jagged pipe from the floor. He wasn't sure if it was bone or metal, and charged the thing wearing Arlo's face. He swung once, twice, cut deep into its shoulder. Black bile sprayed across his chest. The thing didn't scream. It smiled. Then it opened. Not its mouth, its chest. A seam split across the torso, revealing rows of smaller mouths inside, each one whispering different words. Failure, greed, you, and one, right in the center, whispered, home. Hector tried to run, but the chamber collapsed again. Teeth descended from above. The floor slithered up his legs. He was swallowed before he could scream. Back at Finnegan's Rest, I sat in silence as Calvin finished his story. He looked at me with those blank, dead eyes. Not panicked, just numb. I got out, he said, but not really. I still feel it under me, under the floorboards, under the streets. It remembers us, and it's still hungry. Then he stood up, walked out into the alley, and screamed. Part 4. The Roots Beneath Us. I didn't see Calvin again for 2 days. After he ran screaming into the alley, I waited, called out for him, but he was gone, like he'd slipped between the cracks of the city. I figured the cops picked him up, or maybe he found his way to the river, like so many others who lost more than they could carry. But the thing was, I couldn't forget his words. It remembers us. It's still hungry. There was something too precise in the way he said it. Not manic, not drugged, just assured, like someone who'd seen the map of hell and could now point out the street names. I tried to brush it off, told myself I'd seen enough broken men to recognize the ones who'd finally snapped. But late the next night, something changed. It started with a smell. I was closing up the bar around 1:30 a.m., wiping down glasses, counting cash. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I noticed a faint stench drifting in through the air vents. It was sweet but wrong, like cotton candy mixed with meat left out in the sun. It made the back of my tongue go numb. At first, I thought it was a dead rodent in the ducts, but then the lights flickered, the same way Calvin said they did in the tunnel. And then the hum started, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat heard through several layers of floor and pipe. Hum. I stood frozen, one hand on the bar, the other gripping the rag like it could protect me. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from beneath, from the cellar. I hadn't been down there in weeks. The basement under Finnegan's Rest is older than the bar itself. Stone and dust, old crates of glassware, and kegs we don't use anymore. There's a trapdoor behind the stockroom, rusted, hard to pull open. When I reached for it, my hand hesitated. But I remember Calvin's bag, the maps, the old city layouts. I grabbed my phone and opened the public infrastructure site. It's a tool Calvin once told me about. Lets you see utility lines, tunnel routes, drainage systems. I punched in the address. It loaded a series of colored lines over a grid of the city. Then I zoomed in on the alley behind the bar. And there it was, a decommissioned biological conduit listed beneath the building. No explanation, no diagram. Just a red X and a note. Access sealed, March 1961. That was enough for me. I went down. The basement was colder than it should have been. The hum was louder here. Each throb of it pushed dust off the shelves. Bottles rattled gently. As I moved past the fuse box, I found the old trapdoor in the corner. The latch was rusted shut. I pried it open with a crowbar, sweating despite the chill. A black hole stared up at me. No ladder, no light, just a void. I tied a flashlight to a broomstick and lowered it inside. What it revealed made my breath stick in my throat. The floor was moving. Not water, not rats. Moving. The entire space, roughly the size of a shipping container, was lined with living tissue. Veined, wet, shifting ever so slightly like it was breathing. In the center, a small indent, like the opening of a mouth pressed shut. A ring of white glove fragments surrounded it. I stepped back, nearly dropped the flashlight. Then the hum changed. It turned to a voice. Not speech exactly, but cadence, intention, like something was speaking through the building, not in words but in sensations. Like it wanted me to understand. That's when I saw it, drawn faintly on the inner wall of the hatch. A handprint, small, human. Beneath it, written in what looked like old chalk. You were already part of it. I closed the hatch and didn't sleep that night. Instead, I called my cousin Wes, former city records clerk turned night shift conspiracy addict. He owed me favors. I asked him to dig up anything he could about biological conduits under the Kinsfield area, especially ones marked as sealed in the 60s. The next morning, he sent me 3 PDFs and a voicemail that chilled my spine. Bro, I don't know what you're poking into, but these aren't water tunnels. The term biological shows up a few times in redacted military documents about infrastructure testing. 1960 to 1963. They tested something under Kinsfield, something living. And get this, 2 maintenance workers disappeared during a rerouting project in 61. Their last known location? Directly beneath your bar. I needed to know more. About the thing Calvin found. The tunnel. The chamber. The mouths. And I needed to find him, because part of me didn't believe he ever left that crawl space. That night, I went looking. Part 5. Feed protocols. It took 3 favors, 2 lies, and a lot of alcohol, but by midnight, I was standing inside a forgotten city access station on the east edge of Kinsfield. Officially, it was listed as a gas flow redistribution site, shut down in 1984, never reopened. But Wes swore on his mother's grave that this place was once part of the biological channeling experiment Calvin had stumbled into. The outside looked like nothing. A concrete hut buried in brush and graffiti. 1 rusted door, no windows. The kind of place teenagers dared each other to enter for $50 in an Instagram post. But once inside, I saw it. In the far wall, a hatch. Identical to the one in my basement. Identical to the one in Calvin's story. Stamped on the steel. Project Diomede. Feed Protocol 04-7C. Authorized access only. Beneath that, a circle of faded white painted gloves arranged like petals around the hatch. And in the middle of the floor, a drain. A wide, circular mouth-like drain, crusted at the edges with a substance I didn't want to identify. It pulsed slightly when I stepped too close. I shouldn't have opened the hatch, but I did. The tunnel was narrower than I expected. Built not for walking, but for crawling. Smooth, concrete-lined, reinforced with ribs every 12 feet. The inside glistened with condensation, or maybe saliva. I slid in on my stomach, flashlight in mouth, bag slung across my back. Every few feet, I saw markings etched into the wall. They weren't maintenance notes. They were tallies. Count after count, etched in jagged tool strokes. Dozens. Hundreds. Then, too many to feed. It learns your rhythm. Stops sending skin. The mouth doesn't close. The tunnel curved. Then dipped. Then straightened again. I wasn't tracking distance anymore. Just time. Then I saw it. A room. Artificial. Square. But partially collapsed on one side, where the concrete had given way to veined pink tissue, throbbing gently like lungs. At the center of the room was a machine. Old, Soviet-style controls. Dials in Cyrillic. Tubes that ran from canisters into the walls. A feeding pump. One still had residue in it. Thick red sludge. Behind the machine was a chair. Someone sat in it. At first I thought it was a dummy. Then it moved. Calvin, the thing in the chair, turned its head. His face was there, but stretched thin paper-like. The skin around the eyes puckered inward. His mouth moved a second too slow behind the words. "You shouldn't have come here, Rory. You're alive." He laughed. It wasn't joy. It was despair. No, but I remember being. He stood up awkwardly, like his bones had different instructions than his muscles. "You wanted to understand, didn't you? That's what it wants. Curiosity." He waved toward the machine. "They used this to feed it. Scraps. Convicts. Medical waste. Whatever kept it sleeping. But it grew smarter. Hungrier. What is it?" Calvin tilted his head. "A space between spaces. A failure of death. A city underneath the city." He stepped closer. His chest didn't rise when he breathed. "You're already part of it. You always were." I backed away. Something shifted behind him. In the wall, the pink tissue opened, slowly, soundlessly. From the slit emerged a gloved hand, fingers impossibly long, twitching in gentle waves. Then another. Then a smiling face that wasn't Calvin's. Clown-white skin, black eye sockets, rows of thin, wet teeth that went too far back. It stared at me, and I heard my own voice say, "Keep crawling." I ran, didn't think, just dropped my flashlight, turned, and crawled back the way I came. The tunnel behind me pulsed. Every foot I gained, it squeezed tighter. The concrete began to soften, grow slick. I heard my own heartbeat, then two others layered beneath it. The tunnel screamed, not sound, a frequency that vibrated my spine and filled my throat with blood. Then light, the hatch. I exploded out of it, gasping, clawing at the concrete floor like a newborn animal. The room behind me went still. The hatch slammed shut on its own. The painted gloves were gone. Back in the bar, I sealed the cellar, boarded it up, bolted the floor. I poured bleach down the hatch every night for a week. It didn't help. I still hear it breathing. Under the city. Under me. In me. I see gloves in my dreams. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I find white dust on my hands. Part 6. I remember the sound. I haven't opened the bar in weeks. The windows are blacked out. The liquor shelves empty. No customers. No deliveries. No light. I sit in the dark most nights, listening to it breathe beneath me. At first, I thought I'd made it out. That whatever lived beneath Kinsfield had swallowed Calvin, Arlo, and Hector, but not me. That I had escaped. But I was wrong. So terribly, obviously wrong. Because it doesn't matter if you crawl in willingly or stumble in chasing a ghost. Once you see it, once it touches you, it never lets go. It started with the dreams. They weren't like nightmares. Nightmares end. These dreams just transitioned from memory to hallucination to something too cold and wet to be imagined. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the tunnels. Crawling, deeper than I remember going, through tunnels that had no beginning, only ribs and sinew and blind turns. At the center, always waiting, was the mouth. Sometimes it was Calvin's mouth, sometimes mine, but the voice never changed. "We remember you." Then came the forgetting. Simple things at first, people's names, where I left my keys, how long I'd been sitting in the same spot. Then whole hours vanished. I'd blink and be holding something I didn't remember picking up. I once woke up in the alley behind the bar. Shoes gone, knees bleeding. There was white dust on my fingertips. That was the night I found the mirror. It was behind the jukebox. A small square panel I'd never noticed before. Inside was a compact mirror, old, cracked, speckled with black mold. But when I looked into it, I didn't see myself. Not exactly. The face had my shape, my hair, my eyes, but the smile wasn't mine. It was too wide, too flat, too still. The reflection raised a hand before I did. It waved, and behind it the wall breathed. I tried leaving town, packed a bag, got in the truck, made it 20 minutes out before the road folded. Not literally, but signs disappeared. Exits looped. My GPS stopped updating. Eventually I saw the welcome sign again. Welcome to Kinsfield, a city built on trust. Beneath it, someone had spray painted, built on teeth. That's when I realized the truth. There is no outside. The tunnels don't lead underground. They lead inward, into the city, into us, into whatever pieces we try to forget. That's why it always starts with a crawl. That's why no one escapes it. Because it's not just under the city. It is the city. I think I understand now. The mouths, the gloves, the tunnel that shifts with each movement. They're not traps. They're digestive systems, designed to process thought, memory, identity. It doesn't want bodies. It wants versions, copies, echoes. That's why I still hear Calvin, because he's still alive in here. So is Hector. So is Arlo. So am I. I can't prove any of this. But if you're listening, if you're hearing my voice on some forgotten recording, on some late-night radio broadcast, or whispered through a vent in your apartment, then please, please, don't crawl. Don't follow the breathing. Don't answer the hum. Don't open the hatch. Because once you do, you'll never really stop crawling. You'll think you're out. You'll think you're awake. You'll think you're you. But someday, you'll see the reflection, or hear the voice, or feel the dust, and realize you're just another path inside the subsumed.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.